It's very hard because I guess you would have to assume that anything you do release is going to be out on Twitter immediately, or Facebook, or some other social media. So the issue is about releasing it at all, because once the horse is out of the barn, it's out. And in this day and age, I think back to my own time as a trooper 35 years ago. People went running around with cell phone cameras and the ability to videotape or get still shots or sound recordings of things, and you didn't have that in the back of your mind. But nowadays, while the act is still in progress, somebody is sending the video feed elsewhere. Yeah. It's going out in any variety of media, either just on the cell phones or through texting or Twitter or Facebook, and so it's out there. So you just have to understand that it's pretty hard to keep a lot of stuff secret. So if there is some information that could prejudice the case that you can control, you don't release it because it's going to be out there like wildfire. And it's going to. But at the same time, understanding that things are going to get out there, understanding that there are people that will fill in gaps in information. They will draw conclusions and then they will send it, and the recipient may not know this is not something they know as a fact. This is just, their brain is like in Gestalt psychology. They filled in the blank to make sense of it for themselves. It may not even be trying to be malicious.
So you're fighting misinformation.
Yes, that's right. So that's why you have to get onto it right away with an accurate message, one that you've crafted and controlled and takes into account the law enforcement needs, and to try to overcome it. You try to overwhelm the misinformation that's going out, whether for noble reasons or innocent ignorance or whatever it might be, with accurate information. You try to counteract.
So we would kind of just be more general, like if we knew that there was like a bomb threat, like most likely in downtown Lansing, and we thought it was a big one, would we just kind of say that there's somewhere in the Lansing, East Lansing area? Is it?
No, they probably, because and going back to that issue, the fact that you're already preventing people from coming in and you've already evacuated people out, those people are already texting and emailing the whole world.
Okay,
so if you don't give some more specific information, that's going to create, well, why aren't they releasing any more? However, you may not want to give details about, who, let's say you had gotten an anonymous call, a tip-off on this case to 911. You're not going to want to say, well, it sounded like a Middle Eastern man that called, for example. You want to give away that kind of a detail. Right. You might just say, we got a tip from a 911 call, but you're not going to go into any other depth. How long the guy was on the call? Did we trace him through caller ID? Because we've had cases. We had an idiot. They passed a state law against domestic terrorism. So courts are considered part of our critical infrastructure. Right. Well, this idiot up in Ithaca, his wife gets a speeding ticket, goes to court, gets found guilty by the judge. So her husband gets all pissed off that now their insurance is going to go up. So he calls the court. The judge isn't there. He gets the judge's voicemail and threatens to blow up the court, and he's going to take out the judge and everything like that. And here's a voicemail with caller ID that says who it is. So they charged him under the state anti-terrorism law because he's threatening the court system. So you do get those idiots every once in a while. That provides job security for the cops. But we had a case where a guy in western Michigan, he got fired by a grocery chain, and so he went in and he took a bunch of nicotine. Nicotine, which is in cigarettes, is actually an insecticide that it kills bugs. That's why it's probably not good for you when you smoke cigarettes. But anyway, he went into where they made ground beef, and he dumped a bunch of powdered nicotine into the ground beef thing. So it was viewed as a domestic terrorism case against this grocery chain, but it was really a disgruntled employee.
Right.
But there was a big battle between public health, who wants to alert the public, don't buy and eat this ground beef. We're going to recall it, but don't buy it if it is already out in the store, maybe that slipped through, and because it's got nicotine in it. And the FBI is saying, no, we don't want to give away that there's nicotine. We don't want to admit that we know that it's nicotine, because then that guy's going to know, or that it was the suspect is a disgruntled employee, because then he will hide evidence or he'll flee or whatever. So we don't want to hurt our criminal case. So you had a clash of cultures, both very noble, both had legal authority, public health, and their role is to give out as much specific information as possible The FBI is saying, give out some, we don't want people getting sick and dying, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and lose a chance of convicting this guy in federal court later. So they really had some battles back and forth, and there was the personalities of the people involved as well. But they finally kind of worked out a deal where you would have an agent and a public health person do a joint press release where they kind of check each other, and they would get approval so that they can get out on top of it, give enough information that's specific enough to help people, to save people and protect them, yet not compromise the criminal prosecution.
Okay.
And that's the way to do it, is cooperate. Instead of the public health guy going out and doing his press release and the FBI going berserk, or the FBI giving their press release and public health going berserk because it didn't help protect the public, the thing is to do a joint effort, a joint investigation.
That example cleared it up a lot.
That's right. So, and that could happen with IEDs or anything like that too. I mean, the great fear. I mean, everybody expects IEDs and suicide bombers eventually. It's really almost mystifying that it hasn't happened yet. The IEDs we've had, like that Olympic Park bombing or the dumpster bombing afterwards by Eric Rudolph. I can't think of a lot more significant IED cases in the United States. Nothing of the magnitude of explosives that they have had in Iraq and Afghanistan. Large artillery shells rigged with things that are really going to blow a lot of people up and cause massive injuries. But a great fear, a lot of the planning is for INDs, the improvised nuclear devices, what we used to call during the Cold War a backpack nuclear device.
Okay.
And that's a great fear because that's almost instantaneous. There was wasn't there just was it a movie? No, I know what it was. It was an exercise that the Metro Chicago area conducted. And it was based on the scenario of a possible IND in a major urban area. And in that case, there was people reporting some suspicious thing, and then they got intelligence that said that this group, an Al-Qaeda type group, not a domestic group, but was going to probably set off an IND somewhere in there. So they have this huge swarm of police and fire from Chicago coming into, I don't remember if it was a dumpster or a railroad car or something like that, and then all of a sudden it goes off. Well, that's a bad day for those people. Yeah. They are all gone instantly. And anybody within a certain radius, and then you look at the long-term effects of fallout as the wind shifts and the radioactive plume goes out, and it gets onto crops and on cattle out in the fields, and
just affects
people are driving through this and getting that junk on their tires, and the people that survived in the region are trying to get out of Dodge, are clogging up the highways, but it's contaminating everywhere they go. It's on them.
Oh man!
It's getting the public information out. So that's a huge concern. But that issue of secondary devices, we did see that one. That Eric Rudolph did that one at the abortion clinic, where and I think that was in Atlanta, Georgia.
Also, the bat school bombing he had secondary devices too, but they didn't go off.
Yeah, Andrew Kehoe, interesting character, and a friend of mine who's dead now knew Andy. They used to go down there and take their engines for him to repair, because he was kind of a mechanical genius in a day and age of steam engines, and they didn't even have electricity in homes in rural areas at that time in 1927. But my old college roommate, who's a forensic psychologist, he and I did a paper in '97 in New York City for the American Academy of Forensic Sciences on that. We did a lot of research on him. Yeah, he had only half of his explosives went off that he had put in the basement of that schoolhouse, and but he had explosives in his on the floor of his truck, and he drove up to the scene, close to the scene, to be able to watch the response, like a lot of sickos do. And the school superintendent and another official saw him, and for some reason they suspected him. They went walking up. He had a deer rifle, and he just fired the rifle into the case of dynamite, and it blew himself up and killed these two guys, and I think wounded a few other people right there. But he had devices, incendiary devices, at his farm that went off and started fires in the buildings. And he had he had killed all of the crops in the garden and his trees. He had peeled the bark around the trees, killed all of his animals, dogs, cats, everything like that. Killed his wife and did a lot. And back at that time, there was no control on explosives. That's another thing nowadays. There's only a very few places that sell dynamite nowadays, and you have to have a permit to buy dynamite. State police posts sell permits. The only people that buy dynamite nowadays are seismic crews for oil exploration and people up north that want to blow up a beaver dam where it's blocking up a trout stream. So when I was in Gaylord, I sold a lot of dynamite permits to people that owned resorts where they wanted to blow up beaver dams, because nobody traps beaver anymore because the price of fur is very low because of all the anti-animal trapping stuff. So the beaver are going crazy, and there's nobody controlling the population of beaver, and so they're causing a lot of havoc up there. Well, in northern Michigan, there's only one place you can buy dynamite, and that's in Posen over by Alpena. So it doesn't matter where you get a permit, there's only one place you can go, so it's pretty controlled. In the old days, I used to use it to blow up stumps and rocks on farms. You know, my dad, when he was a kid, used dynamite all the time, and you still find farmers that will go into a shed and find an old crate of dynamite that might be 50 years old from back in the days when they were clearing fields. And sometimes it's unstable, and that creates a problem. But other times, you know how you get rid of dynamite?
Blow it up.
Throw it in an incinerator. You burn it, and it doesn't blow up,
Oh.
as long as it's stable. And the way you tell is whether there's liquid leaking out. If the nitroglycerin gel is leaking out, it's going to have to be blown up where it is. We can't move it. They had a shed up in Gaylord right next to I-75 that the guy found something like a ton of dynamite. It was a huge amount that had, you know, the previous owner had stored, and he didn't realize it, and so they needed to get rid of it. He wanted to tear that shed down, and so the State Police Bomb Squad went up there, and they said if this stuff goes off, it will take out northbound I-75, and it was like 100 yards away from the freeway.
Wow.
And the trouble was, they said they didn't want to go in and start wading around in the pile of loose dynamite sticks.